more than a month ago, you rolled out a policy agenda for GOP leaders, which lists recommendations on issues like big tech overreach. So, with that in mind, how do you think the Republican Party should address national security concerns when it comes to artificial intelligence and social media apps like TikTok?
Well, I think it's such a big range of issues.
Mm-hmm.
First, I think that the efforts by big tech to suppress the Hunter Biden story in 2020, along with major arteries of the media, was really a disgrace, and need to be called out for that. And we need to ensure that the public marketplace on the internet and in social media remains open to the free flow of information. With regard to TikTok, look, the communist China is the greatest strategic and economic threat the United States faces in the 21st century. And having TikTok gathering private information on Americans, I think is not in our nation's interest. I fully support efforts by states and calls of the federal government to eliminate access to TikTok for that reason. And at the end of the day, I think we need to proceed with caution and with eyes open about artificial intelligence. Look, if we step away from innovation and artificial intelligence, I promise you our adversaries around the world will continue to invest and continue to develop that. But we need to make sure that we're protecting the privacy rights of Americans, that we're defending our national security along the way, that we're essentially protecting the integrity of information flow in the world. So these are the largest issues, and they're issues that your generation is going to face.
Yeah.
But today we need to take the right steps in the right way so that we preserve freedom, preserve our way of life, preserve an open and free debate on the internet. And that'll always be my focus.
So, speaking of my generation, one of the biggest economic concerns for us right now is housing. And what measurements would you implement to address the affordable housing crisis?
Well, look, under our administration, we cut taxes, we rolled back record amounts of regulations, we unleashed American energy, we expanded American trade in a way that put American jobs and American workers first, Natalie.
Mm-hmm.
And before COVID hit, we created 7 million good paying jobs. Wages rose at their fastest pace in 50 years, and unemployment reached a 50-year low, including the lowest ever recorded for African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Women unemployment was at a 50-year low. So my first answer to the challenges of housing for Americans is a good paying job. Let's create more jobs, more opportunities, particularly for people in your generation that are just getting started out in life. And that would happen by putting back into practice the policies that we implemented. And as I'll discuss in New Hampshire later tonight, additional policies that ensure that we prevent runaway inflation, the likes of which we're seeing today, and create the kind of exports to free nations around the world that will promote free market economics while holding authoritarian regimes accountable, like China and other nations on the planet who have access to our economy, but give us very limited access to theirs.
You've talked about re-educating public school students with America's founding documents.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those documents you refer to, and how do you think they could play a role in ensuring the soundness of future elections?
America is the only nation on earth that was founded around a set of ideas. Those ideals are described in the Declaration of Independence, and I think it should be required reading for every student in America to understand what minted this nation, that we believe we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Mm-hmm. But beyond that is the Constitution of the United States. And I know there's some debate. There was a University of North Carolina, a number of faculty members opposed a requirement that students take a course on the Constitution. But Natalie, the Constitution and the Declaration are the cornerstone of not just the American government, but the American experiment itself. And I think as we're training up children in the way they should go, along the way, we ought to make sure that as a part of civics education, that they understand those founding documents, they understand the principles of limited government, the preservation of liberties that's been ensured there, it is those ideas enshrined in those founding documents that created the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world, and making sure the rising generation understands that has to be a singular priority for education.